and we will get started with what I find to be a very intriguing, not necessarily matchup, Matt, as much as just the timing of the game and looking at this week 0, because most of the big brands and the big powers don't get involved in week 0. But this year, Notre Dame's got a game against Navy in week 0. And here we see USC at the Coliseum taking on San Jose State, team coming off a 7-5 campaign.
Yeah, so, you know, this is the definition of a backloaded schedule. Like the front is, you know, cream puff cupcake city. And so, like, you can pretty much pencil in USC as being 6-0 through 6 games, but it's those second 6 games. And so I think the good part of this is that, you know, people have the pitchforks out for Alex Grinch at USC. Well, he gets a nice little run up before all the big games. Like, you know, these first several games, certainly like through Arizona State, like, you know, should not be too much of a problem. So if you have issues, if you have difficulties getting guys integrated in the lineup, getting guys to be at their best, developing players, Corey Foreman, cough. You know, so those first few games offer a little buffer, you know, before things get really serious. So, like, I think if you're a USC fan, you're not liking the schedule, but like, I think that is the silver lining to find in the schedule, is that the defense doesn't have to be anywhere near its best right away. You have games that you can take care of no matter what, before things get really intense with Notre Dame on October 14th. So that is the silver lining there. But on balance, it's a really atrocious schedule for USC. Like, if you were to devise a schedule and say, hey, what's a schedule that puts USC in the best position to succeed, to get to the 4-team college football playoff before we go to 12 in 2024, this is not it. You would not have aligned the schedule like this if you were going to say, how do we put USC in the best possible position to succeed?
San Jose State is a team, as I mentioned, that's coming off a 7-5 campaign. They lost to Eastern Michigan in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl by a couple touchdowns, and they played one Power 5 opponent in taking on Auburn down in the Plains, lost that game by a touchdown. Now, Nevada, despite having a pretty successful run of 10 or 15 years for the most part, is now one of the more atrocious teams, at least coming off that 2022 campaign. So that should be an easy touch. Matt, I meant to ask you as we unveil the start of the Pac-12 stretch there with a September 9th game, and just very strange that a third game of the season is already going to be in the books on September 9th. But with Stanford coming to the Coliseum, do you know, and I wouldn't hold you to it, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if you knew the origins of why USC and Stanford always play so early in the conference season?
I have to admit, I don't know the particular answer to that. Just that particular fact, that particular part of the history evades me.
It's been going on for quite some time. Then the bye week, then a trip to Arizona State to take on Kenny Dillingham. And the Sun Devils, of course, coming off a disappointing 3-9 season, but Dillingham, the youngest of the coaching hires and head coaches in the country, I believe at 32 years old. And speaking of which, the very next week, another intriguing coaching hire in the Pac-12 with Coach Prime, and what is turned out to be an influx of all sorts of talent, both through the recruiting ranks and the transfer portal coming to Boulder as USC goes to Colorado. So not necessarily from the standpoint of the competitive nature of the game, we shall see once they get on the field. But if nothing else, a lot of storylines there early in the Pac-12 season.
Yeah, you know, on our UCLA Oregon football preview podcast, we previewed that game as well as a USC game, and we brought on Tony Siracusa, also the editor of Ducks Wire, Zach Neal, to talk about the game. We had a 4-way conversation. So Zach Neal's been on the Voice of College Football before. Zach Neal told me in Twitter DMs, you know, he said, and also in his coverage at Ducks Wire, he said, you know, this is the Pac-12 making sure that Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, plays the marquee names in the Pac-12 before the shine wears off, before Colorado takes on too much water. You want to get Colorado against those elite programs early in the season while the TV intrigue is at a maximum height. Like, you don't want a 5-loss Colorado playing Oregon or USC. You're not going to get the same TV bump that you will when you have them playing early in the season. So Colorado plays Oregon September 23rd, USC September 30. That's a very TV conscious move by the Pac-12, as Zach Neal of DucksWire pointed out to me. That's a particularly interesting storyline there.
And in addition to the conference approach, it's interesting to note that Colorado's got two fairly high weight, high leverage games outside the conference, taking on TCU, of course, just made a run to the national championship game, and taking on a Nebraska team that has been down forever. However, with a new head coach in Matt Rule and always a rabid fan base, I don't recall where those games are being. Well, they took on TCU at home last year.
Yeah, so they're
going
to
TCU. Dallas Fort Worth. Yeah. I don't recall where the Nebraska game is.
I'm not sure about that one. Yeah,
I'll check on that. But again, Colorado bulking up with a couple of difficult non-conference matchups, as they have the last few years, taking on the likes of Minnesota and Air Force and TCU the last few years. So again, Colorado with some interesting non-conference games that won't necessarily, I'm not making a prediction here, but won't necessarily be the most competitive games, but have an allure and will have a lot of buzz around them.
Absolutely. No, I mean, Deion Sanders going against Nebraska and Matt Rule, like just the coaching matchup there, that is extremely attractive, even if the game might not be, even if the teams might be a mess and getting trying to get organized and find their sea legs early in the season. But just Deion against Matt Rule, like, wow, like I'm certainly going to take a look at that game if I have a chance. If it's going up against the USC game, different story, but like, if there's any chance to watch that game, like, I'm certainly going to take a peek. And of course, the stature of that Nebraska-Colorado rivalry for, a good 15 years, like, it took the baton from Nebraska-Oklahoma as the Big 8, then Big 12 rivalry. So, the storylines are intriguing. We'll see about the games, but the storylines are certainly very intriguing surrounding Colorado.